Hi, welcome to Bigfoot Small Talk, the show where we talk about big encounters in small doses. My name is Brad, I'm your host, and if you've had an encounter with Sasquatch or Bigfoot, I want to hear from you. Send me your encounter to bigfootsmalltalk@gmail.com. I would love to share it with the rest of the listeners. I just got this email today from someone up in Northern Oregon, and I thought their story was kind of interesting. It's quick, but I thought it was worth sharing. So here goes. Brad. My name is Derek and I live in Northern Oregon on 60 acres with a 20-minute drive to the closest town. My encounter happened on my property while I was out walking. I'm not going to give out a whole lot of specifics on where I live because I like my privacy and I don't want any crazy people out here hunting my friends in the woods. I bought this property about 15 years ago at auction. It needed some fixing up, but I saw the potential in it and thought after some TLC, it would be a great place for me to live and enjoy the solitude I've been chasing all my life. It was early May of 2011, and I was out taking my dog Jessie for a walk in the woods like we would do almost every morning. This morning was a little chillier than normal, so I threw on a light jacket and out the door we went. Jessie is a beagle and has developed very strong opinions on pretty much everything, and he's not afraid to let you know about it. That's the nice way of saying he barks all the time, like typical beagles do. This day was no different. He would run a little ahead of me on the old hunting trails the owner before me had made, run off the path and either find something to eat or something to chase. With it being springtime, there were plenty of critters everywhere, and he was having a field day. Eventually, I would call him back to keep him in my sights, and most times he would listen. About a half hour into our walk, he took off again up the trail and took a hard left into the brush. The leaves on the trees and the brush had already pretty much come in at this point in the year, so when he made a mad dash off the trail, often it was hard to follow him and keep him in sight. I heard him scampering through the weeds maybe 40 to 50 feet out and heard him start barking again. This didn't raise any alarm in my mind as this was what he usually would do, so I kept my slow moseying pace until I reached the point where he had went off the trail. I looked around and couldn't find him, so I called out his name to bring him back, but he just stayed where he was and kept barking. I did notice his bark sounded a little more aggressive than usual playful bark that he had when chasing squirrels or chipmunks, but not so different that it made me worried. I actually remember chuckling to myself, thinking some poor rodent was about to meet their end by his jaws. I called him a few more times, but still he barked. It was at this point I heard him bark into a growl, almost like a snarl. And now I was worried some. I called his name one last time with a tone that sounded like I really meant it, and I heard him come flying back through the brushes towards me. He launched himself out of the bushes right behind me and took off down the trail back to the house. As he did this, I heard something else coming through the trees that sounded much larger than a little beagle, and I got worried, almost frozen in fear, so I just stood there motionless. About 15 feet away from me it stopped, and I could hear deep breathing that sounded like it was coming from a bull. I slowly started to back up a few feet when it took a few more steps. I felt like something was about to attack me, and I was very unprepared for it. I'm not much of a gun guy, but I do sometimes carry a handgun with me on longer walks for protection, but of course this was one of the few days I walked out without it. I will never make that mistake again. After a few moments of silence, I thought it best to back up from the area and head towards the house where it was safe. I kept turning around, almost walking backwards at times to keep my eye on whatever it was that had upset my dog so badly. When I was about 100 feet away, clear as day, I saw what can only be described as a Bigfoot walk across the path, clearing it in 2 strides. I didn't get a lot of detail, but by size alone, I know for certain it was no human. I haven't had trespassers on my property in all the years I've lived here, and I don't know a single soul of a man that tall or wide or hairy running naked through the woods of Oregon. It was massive, and in that moment I completely understood why my dog had taken off. Realizing I was still an easy 15-minute walk back to the house, I quickened my pace with an eye over my shoulder the whole way back. When I finally arrived at the house, Jessie was firmly planted right by the back door, almost trying to hide behind the little potted plants I had on the porch. I knew he was really scared. That day I went out and got some security lighting to put up on the back of the house. This experience has completely changed me as a man. I no longer take the walks that I used to take every day. I don't spend much time outside at night if I can avoid it. That thing was the scariest creature I've ever seen in my life. I've even contemplated whether or not to move from my property. But over the years, I've grown more accustomed to the idea of it and the idea of having residents on my property now. They had never bothered me before and haven't bothered me since. I just try to give it its space and hope that it continues to give me mine with mutual respect. Sorry for such a long email. I know it was a lot for such a fleeting glimpse, but if I ever catch sight of it again or have another run-in, I'll give you an update. Thanks again, Derek and Jesse. It's a really interesting story, and I don't know how I would feel if I realized that there was a creature that was living in my woods when I am so far away from the rest of society. I'd be a little nervous, no doubt. And that's the thing you hear a lot with these creatures, is that sometimes someone will only have a fleeting glimpse of them, and they had to have been on their property for years before then, but they've only seen them once. It makes you wonder, how do they keep avoiding being seen? Where are they going? How are they staying out of people's sight? You hear so many stories like the one that Derek and his dog Jesse went through. And it makes you wonder how many more people out there have had a similar experience and just never told anyone. If you have had an experience with Bigfoot or Sasquatch, I'd love to hear from you. Email me at bigfootsmalltalk@gmail.com. Be sure to subscribe and like the video. Thank you again for listening, and I'll see you next time.